Okay, so I finally finished Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles last night. I finished it as in I finally beat the boss. But even though I've quote unquote beaten it, I don't think I'm finished with the game yet. There's still a bunch to do. There's multiple cycles of dungeons I still haven't finished yet, like the Nightmare Mode ones, or the newly added endgame challenges. I kinda still want to try to get all the artifacts, even though it's dawning on me that it's going to be a monumental task, and I don't know if I have the time to finish it. And I have a couple friends who just recently picked up the game. I've started up a new character to run through the game with them. So yeah, I beat the game having put 30 hours into it, and putting in another 60 or 80 hours is not out of the question, just depending on what I want to do. But that's not really what I want to talk about. I actually want to talk about the crazy mad scientist, dare I say, genius design of this game. Both in terms of as a game when it was released back in 2003, and also the reworking of the game to make it currently compatible online. I think it is absolutely brilliant in both of those regards, and I constantly see comments of people talking about, well, why couldn't they have done this? Why didn't they do that? And while that's technically true, they could have done that for the re-release. But really, what's the point? Why would you want to do that? What audience is clamoring for that experience? How many would actually make use of it? And would it be worth the time to put the effort to include it? As I said in a previous video, I don't think a lot of people truly understand how this game works, how it plays out, how for its time it was a one-of-a-kind experience. And there are tons and tons of comments I get from people who experienced it back when it first came out, arguably the right way to have experienced it with a group of people. But I think even they don't fully grasp the concept of why I'm so fascinated by this game. So here we go. Let's just jump in and stop wasting time. Think of Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles not as a game. Don't think about it as a game with objectives, with a final boss, you're out to save the world or whatever. Think of it as a study of a society. You're looking at a way of life. Years ago, some sort of life-altering event occurred. It suddenly changed how everybody lived. Instead of just going out and experiencing the world freely like they used to, now certain precautions had to be taken. You had to protect your home, your village, and you could do this by collecting up elemental drops. Collect 3 and you can keep your village safe for another year. Fail and your town goes into ruin. So when the children of the town become old enough, they must take up the responsibility to collect these drops, like their parents before them and the generations before them. That's just the way of life. It's part ritual, but also part survival as well. So suddenly these kids who have grown up together in town are kind of thrust into this life-changing task. Maybe they were friends before, but this is really going to test them and solidify their friendship. Their families are all brought into this too. Their children now form the caravan that's going to keep the town alive for another year. They all run businesses within the town, and sometimes when you go to another family's business, they ask how you're doing, how your family's doing. Thanks for looking out for my son or daughter. I know you need these supplies for the upcoming trip, so here's a discount. They're all going to be interacting with each other all the time, as their lives are now intimately intertwined. So this is your life now. This is your job. It's about surviving and taking care of the village. I think when you're young, there's a certain amount of excitement behind it. But there's no end to this. There's no beating the game. This is the cycle of life. This is how society lives now. So over the years, through going out and collecting drops, you run into people from different caravans, from different towns. You run into some weird characters, some trustworthy, some not so trustworthy. And you just start hearing stories, from the world, different people's accounts, their recollections. There's a Black Knight. He's crazy. He's always going on about his memories, like he's trying to talk to somebody. He used to be a stand-up guy, but who knows what happened to him. You run into this guy named Gertie, who lets you in on a little bit. He always seems to be in trouble, asking you for help or handouts. Every time you cross paths with him, he recites a little riddle, and you have no clue what he's talking about. You just assume that he's some crazy guy, especially since people often question him about certain things, and he has no recollection of doing them. For instance, this one guy calls him out on his friendship with the Black Knight, and he's like, "What? I don't know the Black Knight. What are you talking about?" So you just write him off as some crazy guy. So you just keep traveling the world, collecting drops, coming across different towns. You come across the Selkie village where if you don't watch yourself, you'll get pickpocketed. Except if you're a Selkie. you'll come across the magic village Shella, where they won't let you in unless you have a specific mark. But that's the only place you can get the best magical items. Eventually you come to this barrier that you can't pass. None of the elements will work on it. This is where the story can fork off into two completely different experiences. On the one hand, you keep grinding, you keep collecting drops, you keep venturing out, tackling harder and harder dungeons. You yourself become stronger as well, and that goes on and forever till the end of time. Or, in the midst of all this travel, you pay attention, you listen to the clues. Your village elder once told you that there was a scholar who left your town who was in search of a way to end the crisis forever and rid the world of miasma. The last time anyone ever heard of him, he sent a letter from the town of Magmel. But you've never heard of a Magmel. In all of your years of travel, you've never come across it. Eventually you put two and two together and realize that Gertie is the scholar from your town, and he had hired the Black Knight Leon to protect him as he traveled the world trying to rid it of miasma. They ventured to a place unknown and returned without their memories, which is why they are both shells of their former selves. And I don't know how you're supposed to figure this out without looking it up, but Gertie's riddles are actually clues to a puzzle in the Lenari Desert. If you follow the steps, like cast lightning on a cactus, cast fire on a particular mushroom, cast blizzard on rocks in order, you discover a hidden element, which will allow you to pass the barrier which you couldn't previously. As you rush to that area, you suddenly realize that the Jagon River has dried up, and you're no longer able to reach the unknown barrier. So again, this is a point in the story where you could just get lost. How can you cross the river? Is there another way? Well, if you go to the Veolu Sluice dungeon, you can actually reattach parts of the sluice by casting life on these large plants. And in doing so, it releases the water, thereby restoring the river. And then you're able to travel back to the unknown barrier again. Upon entering the barrier, you come across something you haven't seen the entire game. A green, furry, alien-like creature. He runs off and you follow him through the tunnel. When you come out the other side, you realize you're at Magmel, a cocoon-like town of these creatures. I still have no clue what happens in this town. They're all hibernating, it seems like. Is there a way to wake them up? Do we even want to? It's all sorts of weird and mysterious and creepy, and I love it. At this point, your final challenge is Mount Valenge. By venturing in, you find the source of the world's problems, the source of the miasma. This thing, this sort of alien-like creature, came down to Earth and is spewing out gas, blanketing the planet. So I'm not super fond of where the story goes from here. The story kind of jumps the shark in the last 45 minutes. But one cool thing that it does is that it tests you on your memories. Like, it'll ask you questions about all the interactions you've had up to this point. Do you remember what happened when you ran into this character? What choice did you make in this interaction? And your memory of your story basically decides whether or not you're able to rid the world of miasma. It's kind of incredible to think that this was the concept for something that was released back in 2003. And now switching back to the game design perspective, this game truly was the MMORPG for offline consoles. Remember, this is before World of Warcraft and EverQuest 2. I mean, Ultima Online was out there. I don't know how many of you guys actually played that. But this experience of going out with a group of friends, exploring the world, having quests and dungeons to rerun, and then taking the biggest secret of the game and hiding it within the world, first in plain sight, and then its solution completely buried. This makes me hate strategy guides and the internet, because I came from a time where sometimes these solutions were found out individually and then spread word of mouth from friend to friend. And I think that's kind of the genius of the design of this game. I think it's an open world game whose solutions are only going to be found out through brute force, just a sheer number of people playing it, and eventually someone stumbles across something. I mean, coincidentally, I just came across a Breath of the Wild video where they're talking about how years later, people are still finding new tricks and ways to play the game. And those are the vibes I got from playing this game, this world of mystery and unknown. I almost hate calling it a game, because if you go into it with that sort of mentality, looking for the next task or trying to fight the next boss, it's kind of a mischaracterization of the experience. Stuff happens and maybe you do one thing or maybe you don't. The thought that you can keep spinning the game and keep going on further and further, years and years and years, makes me wish this wasn't designed back in 2003 and that there was more to it. Like, imagine if you could have kids and there was an aging mechanic and eventually they got old enough to take on your caravan tasks. The thought that somebody could easily miss the clues and that the miasma may never be gotten rid of, I don't know why, but that's like the most exciting feeling to me. Oh, and I forgot, I never even mentioned the whole town building aspects. Like how when you're on your caravan, you're constantly writing letters back home to your family. It's kind of like dumb where, oh, your sister says, oh, your plant died. Sorry, my bad. But in actuality, if you have the right interactions, if you're sending home the right materials, you're actually building up your town, making better blacksmiths or alchemists. And now moving on to the redesign, I know there are a lot of people who are upset with this remastered version. You can never really experience the game how it was originally meant to be played. Like as a group, as a real caravan, experiencing everything together. You know, like one of the problems online is that if you're not the host, you actually don't get anything else. I mean, you get the upgrades through the artifacts, but like you don't get to write letters if you're not the host. You can't really build up your town because you're only playing one character at a time, instead of like a group of people from the same town. So that portion of the game is kind of non-existent. It's even stupidly cumbersome to try to exchange items within your own game. Whereas used to, you would all run into a town together. Everyone would have a character. They could just all dump their items into the storage. People could just grab whatever they needed. So I've started a new character, and to give the new character items from my other character, I have to log on that character, I have to go into town, go to the box, drop the stuff off into the box, leave the town, switch characters, go back into town as this new character, go to the box, take a few items out. Oh, realize I forgot to give one item. So I gotta log back into the other character again, so I can go put it in the box for the new character. Yeah, I mean, the game is not designed to be played this way. When you think about it, it is pretty amazing that they were able to rework this game to get it to work online in the first place. Like I've talked about the lobby system and the jump in and jump out, the instantly rerunning dungeons over again, how every dungeon is treated like its own online match with its own online ID code. I know a lot of the fans of the original complain about that because it seems very stupid to them why it would be set up that way. But I'm going to put my trust in the developers and believe that they understand the gameplay structure better than I do. You know, especially considering they're behind the scenes and they understand the structure and architecture of the game. So I'll give you an example. Earlier on, I mentioned the unknown element. Me and my group ran through the Lenari Desert. We completed the puzzle. We got the unknown element. And from then on, I was super careful. I didn't want to accidentally overwrite my element. I didn't want to have to go through the whole puzzle again. So I even made 4 save files. And then I made it all the way to the unknown barrier and realized I had the wrong element. And somehow did I overwrite my element by accident? What happened? So we reran the dungeon again. We realized you don't actually have to do the whole puzzle. But again, my element wasn't changing. I couldn't get the unknown element. One of my party members actually had the element, and he ran the dungeon solo, so maybe that was the solution. So it turns out that this was an anti-griefing measure. In the game, you walk around with the chalice. You come across points where you can change the elements. Sometimes you want to change it, and other times you don't. And especially with something like the unknown one, you definitely don't want to change it. But when you put a game online, you know there's going to be people who are going to want to just fuck with you. And that's an unforeseeable and uncontrollable, sorry, I'm going to say element again. But yeah, they had to take that into consideration. So the way they decided to handle that, you actually can't change your chalice within a match. You actually have to be playing it solo, or you have to do it through the map itself. This is to keep some asshole from running into your game and just randomly changing things up. Remember, in the original game, if you were playing this, you'd be in a room with the rest of your party mates, and worst case scenario, you just run over there and smack them over the head. But to have to find a solution like this really makes me appreciate that this game is really old. And this game was not originally online, so to find a way to somehow piece that together, I think that's pretty technically impressive. I know there's still going to be people who are unhappy that they can't play it the original way, or that there's not local co-op included. But I do think that there are real reasons why they either couldn't do it or didn't want to do it. I mean, it might not just be worth it to cater to that audience financially. I really don't think that there's enough people to make it worth it to spend the time to do that. And it could possibly mess up other portions of the game or create other problems. I really should wrap this up. Maybe there's one more Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles video left in me. Maybe I'll try to answer all those questions why. I really would love to talk to a developer. Maybe there are real technical reasons why they couldn't. I mean, this game is on PS4 and Switch and even phones. And while I know that there are people clamoring for that couch co-op experience, I think there's not that many of them. I think most of them have already experienced the game in that way. And it's nice that they want to relive it again, but I don't think that's the target audience. And finally, if you really do want to experience that again, and you have the friends to do it, the game's still playable on the GameCube in its original form. I mean, the servers are still up, right? Alright, I gotta get out of here before those guys kill me. Thanks for listening, especially for those of you who stuck to the end of this. I really enjoyed the experience. I'll probably still be going back to it for a while, so if you're looking to start it up, hit me up. I've got a couple new characters I'm trying out. So yeah, that's it. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye. The whole time? You can't run around? Oh my god, he petrified us?